Hello and welcome to the Proclamation Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nolan. You'll notice in our first few episodes that we called ourselves Fourscore Sessions. That's okay. We still are part of Fourscore Sessions, but one of our lovely team members came up with the name Proclamation Podcast, and we couldn't pass it up. So follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and all those other platforms that we forget about, and enjoy these episodes of the Proclamation Podcast. Cheers. All right, so I want to welcome my next guest, Mr. Justin Nguyen. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, man.
So Fourscore Sessions, we're all about telling stories. And when you told me that you're moving to Orange County, I was like, I got to get Justin in here to tell his story before he leaves because I may never see you again.
Yeah.
No, I know I'll see you many times, but I just wanted to. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. Like, I know there's so much crap going on right now, and then to have one more thing and to say, hey, come spend a couple hours laying down a podcast is like, is this really priority right now?
Man, for a friend, anything.
Yeah. So when you said yes, I was pretty stoked. So the way I met Justin was at a wedding. I think was the first time I met you. It was at Daniel's wedding.
Yep, 2016.
And you introduced yourself to me as not John Wang's son.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what does that even mean? And then I later got the joke. But then just connecting with you through church and then having you come work at Fourscore was like the craziest foundation for me because I always knew I could count on you. And sometimes in the coffee world, people are like up and down as far as like, can you rely on them, or are they going to make work a priority? And so like you were being a rock, like for me, which probably didn't realize that, but knowing that every Monday and every Friday, it was going to be you and me rocking the bar and serving people. And just got to know like your heart and your desire to like see other people grow in Christ and to pour into other people, and then to also just hear like your story and like your background and what you came from was just amazing. So I don't know how deep we'll get into all that, but
we'll find out.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, man.
So just tell me about like growing up in Orange County or I guess not Orange County, but
yeah, Orange County.
Is
actually.
it Orange County?
Yeah, so
okay.
I was born in Orange County, but
Okay.
my parents weren't born in Orange County. Son of immigrant parents, and they came from Vietnam. So fun fact, I'm 100% Vietnamese to the point where I've shared this with you. My mom didn't have to change her last name because her maiden name was already Nguyen. And so when my parents got married, she didn't have to change her last name because it was already that. So
very convenient.
Yeah. So that's a little fun fact about that. But yeah, they came over to America during the war. Like they were probably under 10 at the time. I mean, they didn't have birth certificates or anything like that. And my mom ended up in Orange County, LA area. And then my dad was East Coast. And so they met at Cal State Long Beach, and they eventually got married, had me. I was born in Fountain Valley, and man, that's where I grew up.
Where's Fountain Valley at?
So it's right by Huntington.
Okay.
Yeah, right by Huntington.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. So what brought you to little old Roseville?
Man, what brought me to Roseville? Didn't even know Roseville was on the map. So
they probably want to keep it that way, you know?
Yeah.
They want to stay sleepy, but
I didn't even know it existed. I was like, Roseville's in California? I think it started in 2016 when I was still serving at my church in Southern California. And I had met a pastor up here who's currently my senior pastor, Richard Semino. And we met in 2016. And long story short, he just asked me to come on staff with him as his high school pastor, and prayed about it. And just knew God was calling me to walk forward in faith. And so, made the decision and packed up my bags and moved to a place that I only saw one time, didn't meet anyone.
Yeah.
And just moved up.
What's it like moving somewhere when you don't know if it's going to work out financially, logistically? Are you going to like people? I mean, what's it like?
Yeah. I mean, there's many components when I think of a move like that you move and you leave your social network, all your friends, your family. You step out of your familiarity where you grew up and places that you're familiar with and places that you enjoy. And so I think that the most difficult part was on multiple fronts, and the first one being leaving my social network.
Mm,
So leaving all the great friends I had, leaving my church home, leaving my family and all of my extended family, leaving lifelong friends,
yeah.
and just stepping out into the unknown, into a context where I didn't know anyone. That was probably the most emotionally difficult um, and shifting for me, where I just walked from having all of this to absolutely nothing, to where I was stripped and I knew no one and had to really start from ground zero. So that aspect I would say was the most difficult. The financial aspect, um, yeah, I was truly blessed that a family opened up their home to house me and to allow me to live with them and their family to me now, like just
Yeah.
because
They're
they
so
invited me
awesome.
in and yeah, they're blood to me now. But at first, it was really difficult. I was working 3 jobs when I first moved up. I was working at In and Out. I was
Oh, dude,
working,
I forgot about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was working at In and Out. I was working here, and I was working at the church.
Yeah.
And so just yeah, I was in bivocational. I was trivocational at the time, and I only did that for about 4 or 5 months, and then I was just like, I can't do this. This is too much.
Yeah.
And so I stepped back from In and Out, and then was working here in the church. And so that was a
Dang.
financial aspect, and then um, just the different culture. I think that was another like really difficult thing. It's like it was still California, but it was totally different. You go from laid back shaka lifestyle to suburban,
So,
like yeah, you go to the suburbia and you just meet
where's your diesel truck?
yeah, totally. Just like for the very first time, I heard kids were going to high school at Del Oro, a local high school, and they have water wells for their water and for their electricity. And I'm
Oh,
just
yeah,
like, wait,
totally.
what?
Yeah, I don't have that in
And
Orange County.
yeah, I was like, oh
I
my
don't think.
gosh. Yeah. And so it's just like entering into a new context and
Mm,
learning how to, not in a sense conform, but assimilate. So just kind of in a sense, still be who I was formed to be for 19 years of my life and to just add a new culture to
yeah.
who I already was. So,
Um, there was something you said about, oh, about having 3 jobs. What do you say to people who are younger people under 40 who don't take that um, initiative to maybe hunker down and put their head down and work hard for a short time? Like what you did is not typical. Most people are like, "Oh, I can handle a job and a hobby." What do you say to people who are like that, like who feel like I can only focus on one thing at a time, um, when they have the same need that you did, which is I gotta get more income.
hmm
I gotta provide for myself and my wife, my kids, whatever they
yeah,
might be.
was planning for a wedding too,
Yeah.
eventually soon. So, um, I think one of the biggest things is first and foremost to understand that our lives are seasons. There's no season in our life that is perpetual.
You
And
don't
I
have to
think,
do it forever.
yeah, is like, and I think that's the despairing mindset or the discouraging mindset that holds people back from whether stepping into any venture of risk or any type of uncomfort or any type of like grind. It's like
Mhm.
just the fear of like, is this going to be my life forever? But if you can get into the mindset knowing that, man, this is for a season, that this is for a time, you're able to endure present hardships because you know that there's purpose beyond the present season. Um, and I think this is a truth that we've seen all throughout human history. I mean, they've interviewed people who are at Auschwitz at the concentration camps, and they asked some of the people who made it through, and they said, like, how did you psychologically like go through this. And it was a common trend along a lot of people who were interviewed, was that those people who had purpose beyond their present season, they were able to endure the momentary difficulties.
Mm,
And so it's like, that's kind of true in all of life. It's like, if you know that life isn't going to be like this forever, but that it's short-term sacrifice for a long-term outcome,
totally.
or a return on investment, whatever language you want to use, you're able to, in a sense, plow. You're able to grind for, just that period of time. Whether it's,
Yeah.
for me, it was 4 months. It was a grueling 4 months. I mean, yeah, just adding on top of all those responsibilities altogether. Um, Not just in terms of time, but I think one of the most difficult things in the grind is not just the physical labor, of being places, but I think it's more the emotional, um, capacity that you have to spend on doing all these different types of things. And so I think if you have your mind in check, and just have good perspective, that it's only for a season, that it's going to carry you through those moments. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, everyone has those seasons. To avoid them, inhibits your growth and
Mm,
inhibits you from where you want to be and where you want to go.
yeah.
So,
I think it's like running running a race, and you've got these obstacles along the track,
hmm
and if you try to move them, you get disqualified. And I think that people spend a lot of time trying to move the obstacles instead of overcoming the obstacles.
hmm
And I've done that. That's how I recognize it in myself is, I just want this problem to go away. I just want this. I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. So I'm like, no conflict. And so I just want the problem to go away, the money to work itself out, whatever it might be. I don't want to deal with it. Um, and I've seen in my life when I try to move the obstacle that I usually don't learn anything because I've avoided a learning experience.
hmm
And I often hurt somebody because that obstacle is usually associated with a person. And so if I just push that aside or push it off for a long period of time, it becomes more and more difficult to actually overcome, which is
hmm
what I'm going to have to do
hmm
eventually anyways.
hmm Yeah, it's so true. I met a new friend recently over the last few months, and he's a licensed counselor and therapist. And we've kind of just been talking and just about like our lives. And he's been able to counsel me in a lot of just different difficult situations and circumstances. And we talked a lot about the concept of growth, like
Mm,
personal growth, in terms of, um, he comes from a biblical background, and so he's comes from a biblical perspective. But so we are just talking about more so in Christian language, sanctification, the process of becoming like Jesus, or if you don't want to use Christian language, just the process of becoming, a healthier person.
yeah.
From growing from a selfish person to a others focused type of person, growing from, prideful and arrogant to humility, whether you want to use Christian language or not. Um, and we talked about this concept of growth and how every individual, we get to this place where he calls it, in psychology, you hit something called the wall. And when you hit the wall, these are the moments where you have opportunity. He told me to either, you literally have to break through the wall and you have to
Mm,
like run it down and just get through it, or you're going to turn around and go back, and that's just going to cause what he called this cycle of immaturity,
mm,
um, especially when it comes to like certain aspects. So, for example, um, let's use the concept of like generosity. Like you're given a moment to be generous towards a friend, family member, or just a stranger,
yeah.
and that could be your so-called in quote wall. And you have an opportunity to, whether it's to break through the wall, i.e., an example, you're going to have to go out of your way to make a sacrifice to be generous, or you're going to turn away from the wall and you're just going to repeat your cycle of immaturity. And so,
Hmm.
something that was really helpful for me, just understanding a lot of life, is like, man, we're going to encounter those walls, but what makes someone, in a sense, um, get farther along in terms of their growth or in terms of where they want to be, you have to take those deliberate actions to break through the wall.
Mm.
And it ain't easy, but
No,
they're the most rewarding moments oftentimes in life that produces the most growth. So,
man. that makes me think of how everybody's got different walls right now because of COVID,
Hmm.
and they're all trying to overcome. And one thing I hear a lot of people say right now is, together we're going to make it through. But not every obstacle can be overcome together. Some are individual.
Hmm.
If you have um, PTSD or depression, it's not like you're going to always get together with other PTSD or depressed people and talk it out. You need to go by yourself and see a therapist, or you need to take charge of your medication, or whatever whatever the prescription is for your situation. It might not be a group thing. And I see a lot of people right now who they're trying to overcome an individual problem with a group, and then I see people who are individuals who are trying to overcome a group problem individually. What would you say to people like that?
Man, it's a great question. Yeah, I don't have an answer, but I have a response. So I think that's important to define. It's knowing that there is that difference between an answer and a response. So when it comes to the concepts of individualism and collectivism, I think that there's danger in planting your flag on any one side definitively,
Hmm.
because there's strengths that come from both. We see everything that Western culture is built upon is individualism. And the reason why
Yeah,
we're able to become where we are as a nation is because of the individualistic mindset. It's all about me. It's all about my goals and the people closest to me. It's that very individualistic mindset. But um, taken to extremes, that's not healthy at all.
totally.
And on the other side, collectivism, it's when the whole concept of we are better together. And it's so true. It's like the old adage, the wisdom of if you want to, in a sense, run far, go alone. But if you want to run long and get distance, run together.
Totally.
And so I think that, man, um, finding the balance between whatever circumstance in your life, it's to, in a sense, teeter totter and walk the fine line between sometimes you have to act from a collectivist framework. And coming from a Christian standpoint, like this is absolutely biblical. It's like we need the body, the biblical
The
language of the
different parts.
church. Yeah. And the Bible talks about how, the arm can't say to the foot, I have no need of you. And I think that there's pivotal moments in our lives where we need other people. We need other perspectives. We need other people's support. We need other people's prayers. We need other people in our lives to, just walk us through difficult seasons in our lives, to walk
Yeah,
through transformative moments. And so there's moments for collectivism. There's moments for where you need a good support network around you. Um, and then there's the other side is like, I think it's just using wisdom. On some sides, you have to, again, work together. And then other sides is like, there's certain things that whether God's calling you to do it and you just know definitively. Let's use the Old Testament example of the life of Abraham. Abraham grew up in in the day, an elite society. He came out of Ur and he came out of Mesopotamia, and God called him alone out of everything. The Bible talks about in Genesis 12, like, hey, I'm calling you to come out of your family, your land, your people, your kindred, your
mm,
culture. And that was a personal and individual call. And there's certain times in our lives where God has an individual calling, whether it's big or small. It can be an individual calling in a small sense of like, hey, man, you need to love your wife more. Like, hey, you've been really, selfish over the
mm,
last week and you need to die to yourself and to sacrifice for the sake of your bride. And, that's like more day-to-day stuff. And then there's other bigger stuff like, fill in the blank. There's moments where you have to operate um, from an individualistic mindset. And I don't mean that like you operate alone, but what I mean by that is you operate upon God's leading. If He leads you and guides you in a specific thing. So I think it's like you teeter totter between the individual and the collective, because the Bible speaks on both and both sides are dangerous. We see the Proverbs speak profusely about the concept of A man who is isolated rages against all sound judgment, and
Mm,
it just ends up in destruction, oftentimes. But so I think it's just teetering that there's no just broad stroke answer. It's more of a time and place thing, situation by situation thing, person by person thing. But I think it's important to understand that we have to have both, in a sense, in our toolkit
yeah,
to operate from, and to have, in a sense, both frameworks to work from. So to have just one would be dangerous.
yeah.
So,
Um, I think that is an answer though. It's that you have to have balance,
mm-hmm,
and that you can't just go through life saying I'm only going to think about me or I'm only going to think about the group. And historically we've seen that happen a ton where people were only concerned about themselves and they failed, or they were only concerned about a specific group of people and they failed as well. Um, and I think that we forget that life is a little bit more complicated than we want to make it, and then sometimes it's just more simple than we're making it.
mm-hmm,
And to just be more aware of that. And I see so many conversations, or I should say I hear so many conversations of people who are like, oh, I've got this figured out. And it's like, dude, you've closed your mind to the bigger picture. And because your view is so narrow, you're running off of a cliff because you can't even see that the ground is dropping off in front of you,
mm-hmm,
or you're running into a hailstorm of arrows
mm-hmm,
because you're just looking at this thing that's far off,
mm-hmm,
this dream, this American dream, or this personal goal. And because you've narrowed your view, you're going to run over people who you can't see, or you're going to miss opportunities to partner with people, or you're going to hurt people because you're only thinking about yourself,
mm-hmm,
and you've decided to put this lens on that's just so narrow.
mm-hmm,
um, and it's sad.
mm-hmm,
And I think what part of what we want to do through these conversations is just encourage people, like, talk to more people.
mm-hmm,
Like, you and I have enriched each other because we're not the same, and we have learned from each other because we have different experiences,
mm-hmm,
and we have respected the other person's viewpoint. And I remember a conversation with you, me, and Daniel in the car, and I was like, I don't think like either of these guys, but I love this conversation
mm-hmm,
because I'm starting to think like these guys, and to open up my worldview even more, because I thought I had figured out the topic we were talking about, but I had figured it out only based on my perspective. And hearing your perspective opened me way up, to just another way of thinking. And
mm-hmm,
it wasn't looking for an answer. I thought I found the answer.
mm-hmm.
But once again, probably didn't know you're doing it, but you're like opening up my worldview to, hey, this is how someone like me thinks about this perspective.
Mm-hmm,
And um, that's, I think, healthy in every topic. We talk
mm-hmm.
about that in coffee all the time. It's like,
Yeah.
you think you should brew it this one way, and then somebody does a vlog or puts out something on Sprudge, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do you mean you're gonna you know do some crazy stuff with the beans while it's in the roaster? You can't do that. and,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're like, no, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then you try it and you're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So good. So good. Yeah, I think it's so true. Like, balance is so important. And there tends to be, I would say, in our moment right now, in where we are as a society, as a nation, as a culture, there can be almost an unhealthy rigidness, and unhealthy sense of, I've got it.
Yeah,
Whether that comes from your perspective, whether that comes from your stances, it's almost this sense of like, I know all the facts. It's almost like I got a monopoly on truth. Like, I know everything out there, and so I'm already settled. Rather than you and me coming from, like, Jesus saved us, like from a Christian standpoint, it's that no, we have to recognize that, in the language of Paul, I'm not attained. like I am not there yet,
Mm.
and that we never will be.
Yeah.
And to have a posture of the student for the rest of our lives, I think it's so important, for every aspect of life, that we're always learning, that we never, in a sense, think we have all the answers, but to always be willing to have an open ear and to listen to other people, to be able to learn to understand how someone else thinks. And I think that's really important, in our day and age, is like understanding how someone else's thought process, like their pathology, rather than just their conclusions. Because it's dangerous if all you see is someone's conclusions, because if you don't agree with their conclusions, anyone
You
can
just
do
write
that.
them off.
But if you understand their pathology, that's where you begin to truly broaden your understanding and your knowledge on whatever topic it can be. I had a friend of mine, who I'm going to be teaching with. He's my department head, and he talked about one of the principles that he teaches in critical thinking, to his Bible class. Is he said, you need to have your opinion and know why you have your opinion, and then we can have a conversation.
Mm.
And he said that, and I was like, okay, unpack that for me. He said, a lot of people can have an opinion, but they don't know the second part. They don't know why they have their opinion. It can just be parroting someone else. It can just be copying someone else that they know, whether it's a family member or friend or their network, like everyone just has a set opinion or conclusion on any given topic. And they themselves don't know why they have that opinion. And so I think something that's really important, in my realm of what I do for a living of teaching, is to teach that, hey, everyone should have an opinion, but the second part is you should know why you have your opinion. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're not standing on any solid ground, and you're just parroting, or you're just an echo, and you're not, in a sense, your own voice. And then that's why the last part is you have to have your opinion. You have to know why you have that opinion. Then you can have a conversation. But sometimes people want to have a conversation before they know why they believe what they believe.
And
That's
destroy
just,
other people during that
yeah,
conversation.
and it just becomes, in speech and debate, they call it ad hominem. It just becomes
Mm-hmm.
attacking another person, and that's just so unhealthy in so many ways. But yeah, good conversation. I love the concept of this podcast, just opening up for open conversation.
Yeah.
And I think before conversations happen, you have to have opinions and know why you believe what you believe, and not just accept ideas that you haven't understood the pathology behind it. Don't hold to a conclusion if you don't know how to get there. So,
And I hope that as people listen to us talking, they'll be encouraged to talk to people in their circle
yeah,
about these topics.
yeah.
All right, we're back from our break with Mr. Justin Nguyen, podcaster extraordinaire.
Nah, man.
You're so natural.
No, this is my first time doing a podcast.
I feel unnatural still in these podcasts, so we'll see how that changes.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll do a podcast in the future.
Then I'll be your guest. I'll buy you lunch.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
If you have me on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going back to Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about seeing the changes in like culture and moving up here, losing your group, your social network. What are you looking forward to going back, and what are you going to miss that is here, or something that you learned here that you're like, I'm taking that with me wherever I go, no matter what circle it's in?
Yeah, great question. I think there's more surface level stuff and then deeper level stuff when it comes to like what I'm looking forward to, and
forget about the surface.
Yeah, so we can start from the top and then take a dive down lower.
Okay, sounds good.
So kind of like a descending pool.
Mm.
I think the surface level stuff is the weather. Like this week's 107, 107, 105,
Dude,
105.
This morning it's jumped from 107 on my Tuesday forecast to 111.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be flying down this weekend. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be flying down this weekend, and so it's going to be 78.
Is your wife staying here?
Yeah, she'll be here, and then she will be flying. She'll be flying
down.
Bye.
I hope you enjoy the heat.
Yeah. Oh, it's so bad. Wish she could be with me the whole time, but I'm going to be working for 2 of those weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, just the weather, the opportunity of food, just because it's so competitive down there within the restaurant industry, and so it really creates like high quality. And so with everyone competing, you really have to have a leg up on one another, and so that means some of the best tacos out there.
Yeah,
Like
for
truly
sure.
some of the best carne asada tacos. Looking forward to that kind of stuff. But other than those types of things, like the weather, the food, just more the convenience and stuff like that, which I would consider more the surface level stuff. And obviously the ocean and all the different opportunities down there of just leisure and fun.
Sure.
I think the thing that I probably look forward to the most is just engaging in that culture. Just because it's a culture that I grew up in, I have a huge heart for, um, and I really want to make an impact for Jesus. Like that's really my number one priority in
Yeah.
life. It's to make an impact for God and His kingdom, and what I mean by that culture is it's just a different culture than where we are here. People are more success driven, more individualistic. Those are more of the bents.
In Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's typically more of the bents you see in the business world. You see it in the fashion world. You see it in all sorts of stuff, that people in a sense are pursuing excellence and comfort. And those
Yeah.
are kind of like the idols of the culture. And so I think I look forward to that the most because I just love engaging with those types of people and yeah, reaching those people for the kingdom. So I'm going to be working in a school setting and I'll have hundreds of kids throughout the years, and I'll just be able to impact high schoolers for years to come. And potentially, I'm going to be coaching as well. I'm going to be potentially coaching volleyball.
Oh, wow.
So we'll kind of see how that
You
goes.
played volleyball?
Hmm.
I did not know
Yeah,
that.
played volleyball in high school.
You
So
you got around in the sports world.
a little bit, not really.
No.
So yeah, I
Just a
wish.
couple.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah.
So yeah,
A
just
lot
a
of
few.
people just play one, so
Yeah,
or none.
yeah. So
Told my wife she really missed out on sports.
oh, did I miss it? So I'm
Yeah,
excited for that opportunity to potentially coach. So
that's cool.
yeah.
So what you said reminded me of this story. When I worked at Starbucks, I became really tight with my assistant manager. He was the one who hired me, and he was about, I don't know, 8, maybe 10 years older than me, and he's about the age I am now, and I was in my early 20s, and we just really hit it off. We ended up starting a business together. It was my very first business
Mm.
called J&J Hay Supply.
Wow.
We delivered exactly 0 bales of hay, but we started a business. We put an ad in the newspaper, all this, paid for the license,
Oh man.
everything.
All supply, no demand.
Yeah,
Was that?
exactly. So yeah, we just never got it off the ground. Like
Hmm.
we had to buy a truck, and anyways, it's a long story, but it was a lot of fun. We made business cards because that's the first thing you're supposed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyways, Jason and I were really tight, and we ended up taking this road trip down to San Diego because he was like, dude, I'm never gonna make enough money working in coffee, and I got kids and stuff. So he wanted to become a police officer in San Diego. They were hiring. It was really hard to get in anywhere in the Sacramento area at that
Mm-hmm.
time. So I said, man, I'll drive down there with you. Had to like do the physical test and the written test and all this stuff. So we drove down to LA, and we both really like music. We realized as we were pulling um like into like downtown LA area that we had not turned on the radio the entire drive down, because we had just been talking the whole time. And that was like when I realized I had like a really good connection with him. And we ended up cranking up some Snoop Dogg because we're like, when in Rome.
Hey, there you go.
And I remember talking about the LA and just Southern California in general culture. He was like, man, I just really want to be down here. I really love the culture. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, I feel like in Northern California, it's like I'm better than you. I look better than you. I have more than you. F you. And in LA, it's like I'm busier than you. I'm driving faster than you. I have more to do than you. F you. Like, just get out of my way. Not that I'm better than you. I just need to get from A to B. And he's like, I'm okay with people flipping me off because I'm driving too slow, but I'm not okay with them flipping me off because I'm half Filipino. And that launched like a whole nother conversation with him, obviously. Um, but I just always that stuck with me of like that even in California you could have these two very different cultures, and I'm not sure that really sums up the culture as well as somebody else could, but to him that was the summary of it. It's like I'm better than you versus I'm just doing a lot. I'm just busy. I'm just want to move fast. Um, so I've always thought about that when I talk to people from LA, and when I go there, it's like, how fast are they driving? How fast are
Mm,
they moving?
yeah.
And up here, we're just slow.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, yeah, it's like I think that's just a puzzle to the whole picture, a puzzle piece to the whole picture. And I kind of think of it like as you say that, like up here, it's more you're trying to be better than other people, but when you're down there, you're trying to be better than yourself, like who you
Mm,
were a year ago, and that can kind of encapsulate some of the ideologies of the LA mindset of like you're trying to accomplish a lot for yourself, not so much for trying to be better than someone else necessarily per se, but just in a sense to conquer yourself. I think there's a guy who wrote a book about this idea of like a dude who climbed Everest, and he said the biggest obstacle was not Everest, it was him,
yeah.
overcoming his own self, his fears, etc. So
Was it Sir Edmund Hillary?
I don't remember the name at the
Mm,
top of my head, but just remember the story.
yeah. Yeah, that's a crazy accomplishment. Um, what was I going to ask you? I don't know. Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask you. So, how are you better than Justin Nguyen when he moved up here?
Oh man, Lord had to break me a lot. um Young zeal was killed, young pride and arrogance had to die. um
Did you
yeah.
want that to happen, or it just
No,
happened?
no, it was one of those things you don't realize your blind spots ever. They're called blind spots for a reason. You don't see them. And when someone says, these are my weaknesses, that's your weakness, but that ain't your blind spot,
Mm,
because you're blind to them. And I think there's a big difference because you can see your weaknesses, but you can't see your blind spots, and your blind spots are much more insidious. So,
they hit you harder when they
yeah,
hit you.
yep, they're deeper character flaws. And so, yeah, I mean, God really had to um, do, in a sense, a stripping away, had to do a lot of killing within me,
Mm,
um, for the better. So, yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, it's not like, oh, I was there and now I'm here. It's more so I just recognize more so the depths of my human frailty. I recognize more so the depths of my sinfulness. I recognize more so the depths of my um, just brokenness. And I think that's what God really had to do, is just open my eyes to the reality of like, oh my gosh, I think there comes a point where, coming from a Christian perspective, the more mature you are, and I'll back it from scripture, but I believe that the more mature you are, the more you see your sinfulness and your brokenness.
mm,
And the more you're willing to actually own it and accept it. For example, in one of Paul's closing letters to his young protege, Timothy, whom he called like his own son, he said, Timothy, this is a faithful and worthy saying that is like, this is one of the most important things I could say, like he's using biblical language for that. But he said this, that I'm the chief of sinners.
mm,
In other words, I am the precipice, I am the crescendo, I am the mountaintop of sinners, and God still chose to save me. And this was at the end of his ministry that he recognized the depths of his sinfulness. And I think that there's this false notion of growth, or more specifically, spiritual growth, that you think, in a sense, like you are becoming a better person, but you also have to be growing in your awareness of how horrible and broken you are. And if there's this aspect within your heart where you think you're like, in a sense, um, just made it, or I've attained, or in a sense, like, yeah, any types of those types of feelings, then I think, in a sense, kind of backtracking, because what we see biblically is that the more you mature, the more you realize how sinful you are.
mm,
I mean, you look at the pillar of the church, whom God built a church upon, Peter. Um, his first words to Jesus was, "I am a sinful man. Depart from me." And so I think that that's an aspect of what God had to do in me, is just recognizing, man, how broken I am.
Mm. So what do you do once you're broken?
Beg the Holy Spirit for transformation. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, just allow God to transform the broken aspects of who you are. So,
Do you think that's going to be a lifelong process?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you realize your weaknesses, you realize your brokenness, you know that there's blind spots that you can't see that are coming, that are going to hit you. I mean, how do you get up in the morning and have victory?
I think the question is, well, one, we already do have victory. Um, it's not, as Wearsby, popular pastor who passed a couple years ago, he says, we're not fighting for victory, we're fighting from victory. Is knowing that we're already adopted by God. He accepts us, he loves us. One of the biggest concepts that's so beautiful in the Christian life is God, he doesn't grow in his love for you. He doesn't grow in his love for me. God always loves us to the full extent, in our best place and in our worst place. And so
Mm,
getting up in the morning, just knowing like, man, I don't, in a sense, have to strive for God's acceptance, his love to accept me. And when I know that I'm accepted and loved by God, that produces joy, that produces the desire to get up and live. So,
yeah. I think a lot of people watching this will be like, dude, this guy's talking about Jesus a lot. And I think it's important to identify that, like, you didn't grow up in that kind of house.
mm-mm,
Like, something happened in your life.
mm-mm.
So I'll let you pick which question. What happened, or how does your family feel about what happened to you?
Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. The concept of Jesus was so abstract to me. It was so
Mm,
obscure. I think most people would say they're familiar with the idea of Jesus and God, but again, you can have a lot of opinions, thoughts, and comments about it, but that doesn't make it true.
mm,
Um, so I think it started for me growing up in a context where I didn't grow up in a Christian home, didn't grow up in the church. What I always tell people is, where God is not, brokenness abounds. Because if God is not in the lives of a people within a community, all you have is godlessness. You're going to have brokenness. You're going to have collateral damage because people are left to their own self. And so I grew up in a context where just people didn't know God and they didn't know Jesus. They weren't Christians. I didn't know a Christian. I didn't meet a Christian until I was in about junior high. And so I just saw a lot of brokenness growing up, a lot of things that deeply pained me, a lot of things that, because the brokenness I grew up in caused a lot of internal hurt.
mm.
And one of the very first Christians I met was my basketball coach. And I remember at such a young age, he had the biggest smile on his face all the time. And he would just ask us out to lunch, take us to his house, just love on us.
Why
And
is
I
this guy
was
so happy?
exactly. And that was one of my biggest questions. I was like, I've never seen someone in my entire life, 10, 11 plus years, I've never seen someone genuinely happy. And I've never seen, in a sense, someone so loving and kind and just
Mm,
exuded this thing that I have never seen before. And so it got me down a rabbit hole of just asking, what is this? Like, why are you like this? Long story short, my mom got saved around that time, and she was listening to the radio station and heard a pastor teaching the scriptures about the person of Jesus. She got saved by just listening to the scriptures and recognized her need for God, her own brokenness, and that Jesus was God and offers salvation. And so she, in a sense, had a conversation with my dad, and they sent me to a private Christian school. And my very first teacher, I had the same like response I did with my basketball coach of like, wait a second, you're so different. You're so kind. You're so loving. And so I just began to question like, what is this? Why are these people truly different? And I just proceeded to, honestly, I bought a Bible and I got in my room and just started reading the New Testament. I got to the book of Ephesians, and when I got to Ephesians chapter 2, I believe that God radically saved me, because I recognized the depths of my brokenness.
So nobody got you
Nope.
down and beat you
Nope, it
and
was no
told you
preacher.
to be a Christian.
It was no preacher. It was no message. It was none of that. It wasn't a church structure or program. It was literally the Holy Spirit unveiling
Mm,
scripture before me in my room, in Ephesians chapter 2. So that's how I got saved, and that's when my life took a shift, in a different direction. So
yeah.
yeah, so
What would you say to people who say, Justin, that wasn't the Holy Spirit. That was just your inner self growing and changing and telling you a better way?
yeah, that's a great question. Um, for people
Because a lot
who
of people believe that.
totally, yeah,
Uh, and and I'm not saying they're wrong.
mm-hmm,
I'm just saying they believe that, we're ourselves becoming something better.
yep.
That we don't need outside
Totally.
anything.
And so my experience of becoming a Christian, that conversion story, that's not what I bank my faith on. It's not an experience. And I think that's really important to know that I'm a
Mm,
Christian not for that experience. I'm not. That was just happened to be the moment where I believe God saved me, but I don't bank my Christianity on that moment. And what I mean by that is I don't bank my faith on that because I believe at the very core, if we were to boil it down, was I believe that there was a man who lived approximately 2,000 years ago, and he was born in a town called Bethlehem. He grew up in Nazareth, and his name was Jesus Christ. He lived 30 years of his life unknown, unseen, as a masonry, as a carpenter working with stone and wood, and he claimed to be God himself. He made a claim that he was actually God, and he said that he was going to die, and in 3 days he would raise himself, and he actually did it. And so that is where I bank all of my Christianity. It's not an experience, but it's very historical in nature.
mm.
And that's why I'm a Christian. I'm not a Christian because of an experience, because anyone can have an experience. Someone can take some LSD and you can have a trip and you could see some sort of, you can see whatever you want to see. An experience is not what grounds my faith. It's historical
It's a
evidence.
combination.
Yeah. So it's like that's supplemental, but I don't think it's secure ground to stand on.
Mm.
I believe the secure ground, as the biblical authors would say, if Jesus Christ didn't resurrect from the dead, we would be the most pitied of people. We would be the most laughed at, the most ashamed, the most, again, whatever. And so I bank my faith on, again, the historical life of Jesus and what he did, his death, his resurrection, and his claims that he's still alive to this day. So
How would your faith change if we discovered aliens?
wouldn't change at all. Wouldn't change at all. Yeah. I mean, if there's aliens, it's like, cool, why
Yeah,
not? So, yeah.
I just had to throw that question out
Yeah.
there.
No, wouldn't change anything. No. It's like asking the question, what if we found some sort of creature? What if we found some obscure looking mermaid like being in the Mariana Trench down 5,280 feet
Yeah,
below seawater?
we know less about that than we do our own solar system.
Yeah, totally. So it's like we can't even see the depths of the ocean in those trenches. And so why would I discredit or write off the concept of a living organism miles up in the
Hmm.
sky? We got birds, but why not a few more miles up?
Yeah.
So that's how I look at it. The Bible does talk about the creation of the earth and the skies, but again, it doesn't necessarily tell us if there is life outside. So
Mm.
I would say it could be a possibility. But it was never the intent of the scriptures to talk about how things were created. It was intended to write that things were created and who
Yeah,
created them. So,
totally.
yeah.
Do you have any questions for me?
Man, biggest question for you.
Uh-oh.
What do you value the most in people
Hmm.
and why?
Integrity. Super easy for people to do the right thing when your parent is watching, the police officer's right there. You're gonna stop at the stop sign. your boss has a camera right over your head. You're not going to steal the money. I have had so many opportunities to compromise my integrity, and I've taken some of them. I have compromised my integrity. But when I see people do things of integrity and they don't know I'm watching, it means a lot. It means a lot. And it scares me when I have those opportunities because I have the desire. Um, I went through a klepto phase where I never stole anything, but I wanted to steal a lot of stuff. And I never did. I've never stolen anything. Uh, uh, but this probably isn't real wood, so it doesn't count.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Fake.
IKEA.
Pseudo wood.
But yeah, I mean, we all are faced with that. It could be smaller, it could be huge. And yeah, there's been some huge moments of my life. And so when I see those moments in other people's lives, especially youth who are under my care as a boss or at church or in whatever, my siblings, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I see those moments where they're like, what do I do? Where do I go? Should I take this or should I not? And they do the right thing. It's just like melts my heart.
Mm.
And I think we live a life of building on our successes or trying to fix our regrets. And if you have regrets, that's okay. But if you're constantly trying to fix them by going back and, oh, I got to call this person and tell them I'm sorry that I, called them a bad name in 1996. And it's like, dude, most people weren't even born in 1996.
I wasn't.
Yeah. So that's just like, dude, get over it and get on because there's so many more people who need your help and who need your love. And you're not going to be able to make that person from 96 feel warm and fuzzy. Yeah, integrity is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And that can have everything to do with Christianity or it can have nothing to do with it. Everyone can value that.
Mm-hmm.
But I see like what you said, like Jesus said he was going to do something and then he did it when nobody was watching and it changed the world. Doesn't matter if you believe in Jesus or not. Like the name Jesus Christ did change the world and still has a huge impact. So doing what you say you're going to do and doing it right when nobody's looking makes a big impact.
So true. Yeah. It's totally a theme throughout the entirety of the scriptures. One of my favorite Easter verses, because everyone loves resurrection passages, but it's a small statement in Matthew 28 where it simply says, he has risen as he said. And we see this theme just echoed, whether it's the prophet Jeremiah, where Jeremiah 1, he talks about how the Lord says the Lord is watching over his word that he would perform it. And we see that concept of integrity. It's in God himself. It's in his nature. And it's something that we as humans were meant actually to emulate. We were actually created in the image of God to emulate in integrity. And when we see that, I think it's one of the most beautiful things.
You're a beautiful thing. Don't tell Michaela I said that. Well, I want to thank you for being on this podcast. I want to thank you guys for watching. We never know where these are going to go.
Yeah.
And I think that is our number one goal, to be free flowing, knowing that people are like water and they may be hard ice that we got to melt or they just might flow and go and be powerful. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Justin Nguyen, everybody. You can find him in Southern California, fall of 2020, the year we all want to forget.
Oh, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.